In January 1895, a French captain stood in disgrace. "Alfred Dreyfus, you are unworthy to bear arms," the officer declared. "In the name of the French people, we degrade you." Stripped of rank and exiled to Devil's Island, he vanished into a living hell. As France split in two, torn by espionage, antisemitism, and a relentless quest for truth, a nation's soul hung in the balance. What was about to unfold would become one of the world's greatest judicial scandals, the Dreyfus Affair. In 1894, Alfred Dreyfus, a Jewish artillery officer from Alsace-Lorraine, walked into a storm that would define his life. A century earlier, the French Revolution had birthed the First Republic, followed by Napoleon's empire. The Second Republic saw Napoleon III rise as an emperor, but his reign crumbled in 1870 with France's humiliating defeat in the Franco-Prussian War. From the ashes of this traumatic event, the Third Republic was born. Fueled by the loss of Alsace-Lorraine to Germany, dreams of revenge were on the rise. The young republic teetered on the edge. In 1889, it narrowly escaped a coup by General Boulanger, only to be rocked by the Panama Canal scandal, the greatest corruption crisis of the century. While Paris dazzled as the cultural heart of La Belle Époque, drawing artists like Monet and Debussy to its vibrant streets, a darker game of espionage unfolded in its shadows. Paranoia gripped the nation. With fears of German spies lurking in every shadow, new laws cracked down on espionage, and the government ramped up its counterintelligence. At the heart of this web was the General Staff's Second Bureau, home to the Statistical Bureau, led by Lieutenant Colonel Jean Sandher. Tasked with providing the Minister of War with information, the Bureau was rooting out internal threats. In September 1894, a maid working in the German embassy would regularly empty the paper bins, handed the Statistical Bureau a note torn into 6 pieces, but easily reassembled. This unsigned letter, later called the bordereau, was undated, but addressed to the military attaché of the German embassy, Max von Schwarzenkoppen. It stated that confidential information about the newly developed 120 caliber artillery piece, logistical information, and information about specific units, and strategic information about the invasion of Madagascar would soon be sent to him. Someone was trading classified information that could threaten the very security of France, though much of the information was outdated and not of any higher value. Its scope alarmed the Statistical Bureau. The note suggested a traitor high within the French military, possibly within the General Staff inner circle. In other words, the heart of the military. Sandher brought the information to Chief of the General Staff, de Bois de Freux, and Minister of War, General Auguste Messier. The latter had been repeatedly attacked by the press for incompetence. Now he saw a way to redeem himself and thus launched an investigation. The bordereau was circulated among the General Staff's departments with orders to identify its handwriting or source. It gave no concrete results, but by October, the Vice Chief of the General Staff, Charles Arthur Gons, reasoned that the traitor must have access to every department with intimate knowledge of their operations. The investigation was forced to rely on crude and often arbitrary reasoning. But soon enough, they came up with a suspect, an artillery officer named Alfred Dreyfus. Captain Dreyfus was the ideal suspect, a Jewish artillery officer from Alsace-Lorraine. He had risen through the Third Republic's meritocracy, earning a degree from the military school École Polytechnique and a post as a General Staff trainee. This rankled the aristocratic officer corps loyal to the monarchy ideals. Shy, intellectual, and reserved, Dreyfus avoided social gatherings among other officers, appearing aloof to his peers. Dreyfus was also Jewish, and more important, an Alsatian. Worse, investigators believed his handwriting matched the bordereaux. To solidify the handwriting evidence, the military consulted 3 experts. The bordereaux and anonymous examples of Dreyfus' handwriting were sent to them. 2. Major Armand de Paty de Clam and Alphonse Bertillon said it was the same person, though Bertillon lacked graphology expertise. The 3rd, Alfred Gobert, a document and graphological expert with many years of work investigating falsified check signings, firmly denied any match. Sandher, driven by anti-Semitic prejudice, claimed Dreyfus had been sneaking around, probing officers for secrets, baseless accusations rooted in bias and a desire to find an answer. Mercier then sought advice from his colleagues in the government. The Prime Minister, Foreign Minister, and Justice Minister and Mercier himself met and discussed the subject at hand. The ministers emphasized the need for discretion to avoid scandal. The meeting concluded that an official investigation should begin. After a few days, Mercier thought that he had enough evidence to question the suspect, and on October the 14th, he signed the arrest order for Dreyfus. In a quiet Paris apartment, Alfred Dreyfus lived comfortably with his wife, Lucy, and their 2 young children. His family, rooted in a prosperous textile business in Alsace, had fled to Paris after Germany annexed their homeland in the Franco-Prussian War. With a vast fortune inherited from his father, Dreyfus enjoyed the comfort of the upper class. On October the 15th, 1894, he received an order to appear at the General Staff at 9 a.m. for a supposed inspection of interns. Strangely, he was told to wear civilian clothing, not his uniform, a detail that hinted at something far from routine. When Alfred Dreyfus arrived, he was received by Major Georges Picard to what he thought was a routine meeting. Instead of Chief de Bois de Feur, he found Major Dupaty waiting, joined by 3 officials from the police, military, and statistical bureau. Ordered by Minister of War Mercier, Dupaty dictated a letter mirroring the bordereau's contents, hoping to provoke a confession. Dreyfus, puzzled, complied. The dictation continued for a few minutes, but moments later, Dupaty placed a hand on Dreyfus' shoulder and declared, "In the name of the law, I arrest you for high treason." Reeling in shock, Dreyfus mumbled his innocence, offering his home for search. Escorted to Cherche Midi military prison, Dreyfus was illegally placed in solitary confinement, seeing only the prison governor for 3 days. From October the 18th, Dupaty interrogated him relentlessly, day and night seeking a confession. This went on for 2 weeks. The process, Kafkaesque and opaque, left Dreyfus unaware of the charges until October the 29th, when he finally saw the bordereau. That same day, Lucy Dreyfus learned of her husband's arrest when their apartment was raided. Dupaty ordered her silence, warning, "One word, one single word and it will be a European war." Despite every intention to keep the investigation out of public and media, the affair became public knowledge on October the 29th, when La Libre Parole, an anti-Semitic newspaper, plastered on the front cover demanding an answer. But when the paper realized that the spy was of Jewish descent, the tone shifted. Now the headline read, "Jew Dreyfus Treason." The narrative was now mostly anti-Semitic and would soon be followed by other anti-Semitic newspapers that spewed their hatred in a brutal press campaign against Alfred Dreyfus. Under mounting media pressure, Mercier, desperate to save his career and the competency of the French military, pushed forward. After a cabinet meeting, the government ordered Dreyfus to be court-martialed. Mercier, convinced of Dreyfus's guilt, told the press on November the 28th that the evidence was overwhelming. Mercier had now bet his career on Dreyfus's guilt. To bolster the case, he ordered the Statistical Bureau to find complementary evidence. The Bureau now found another letter to the German embassy signed D. They knew that this was another spy, but the letter was included in the evidence against Dreyfus. Almost every piece of evidence in the investigation file against Dreyfus had no connection to him. Meanwhile, Lucy, freed from her silence, telegraphed Dreyfus's brother Matthew, asking him to come to Paris. As soon as Matthew arrived in Paris, he started to familiarize himself with his brother's accusations, even visiting Dupaty. But Dupaty offered only vague assurances of overwhelming evidence. Matthew Dreyfus refused to yield. Despite most lawyers shunning the controversial case, he secured Edgar Demange, a courageous advocate willing to defend his brother. Demange visited Dreyfus in Cherche Midi prison, revealing the vague evidence against him and arranging for a letter to Lucy. In it, Dreyfus poured out his love, outlined the charges, and clung to hope, ending the letter with a hopeful, "The truth will find its way in the end." On December the 19th, 1894, Dreyfus faced a court-martial in Cherche Midi Stark's courtroom. Pleading for a public trial, he was overruled by the president of the court-martial, who kept proceedings behind closed doors to hide the military's flimsy case. Along Dreyfus stood Demange. The trial would last 3 days and initially favored Dreyfus, but the bordereau's handwriting couldn't be conclusively matched to his, and his superiors vouched for his patriotism, leaving no motive for treason. Despite the prosecutor presenting evidence contrary to this, trying to defame Dreyfus's character and presenting expert evidence matching Dreyfus's handwriting with the note, the expert Alphonse Bertillon said that he was not certain that the handwriting was Dreyfus's. However, he presented a theory that Dreyfus had imitated his own handwriting, which would supposedly explain the differences between the handwritings. By the end of the trial, Dreyfus's fate was still uncertain, but Mercier played a final, illicit card. A secret dossier of supposed evidence shared only with the judges. It tipped the scale, and on December the 22nd, the 7 judges unanimously convicted Alfred Dreyfus of collusion with a foreign power and sentenced him to life in prison and military degradation. For the press, both left and right, any doubt of Dreyfus's guilt had been fully dispelled. The sentence came as a shock for Dreyfus. In a letter correspondence between Dreyfus and Lucy, they expressed their love. Lucy wrote, "We will sacrifice our lives and our vast fortune to find the one who is guilty. We shall find him. We must find him. Your honor will be restored." On January the 5th, 1895, in the École Militaire's frigid courtyard, General Darras declared, "Dreyfus, you are unworthy to carry a weapon. In the name of the French people, we degrade you." Dreyfus cried out, "Soldiers, they degrade an innocent man. Long live France, long live the army." His insignia were torn off, his sword broken by a Republican Guard sergeant, and he was paraded before a jeering crowd and then sent away. On January the 17th, Dreyfus was awakened by 3 guards and a representative from the Department for Internal Affairs, who ordered him to prepare for a journey. He was immediately transported to La Rochelle in southwest France and placed in a prison. Mercier, on the 31st of January 1895, ordered that Dreyfus be sent to the penal colony of Devil's Island in French Guinea. Exiled to a desolate speck in the Atlantic after a grueling 14-day voyage aboard the prison ship Saint Nazaire, the Devil's Island was ready for him. Dreyfus was confined to a small stone hut built for his isolation. There, Dreyfus lived alone. By day, he wandered the barren island under guard. By night, he was locked inside, tormented by insects, bowel pain, tropical fever, and panic attacks. Nightmares and frequent guard changes shattered any hope of sleep. In his diary, Dreyfus wrote, "An hour here feels like a century." Marooned in this waking nightmare, he clung to hope as his family fought on. Dreyfus in France, a tide of anti-Dreyfusard sentiment swept the nation. But Matthew Dreyfus stood firm, unwavering in his belief in his brother's innocence, leading a small band of supporters known as the Dreyfusards, working with detective agency and a newspaper to spread a false rumor of Alfred's escape from Devil's Island. The ploy aimed to reignite public interest. The rumor came at a bitter cost. Alfred's moments on the island were curtailed, confining him to his stone hut. But it also stirred the press. Newspapers revived the case, some questioning the flimsy evidence against him. On September the 15th, 1896, L'Éclair revealed a shocking truth. The judges had seen a secret dossier withheld from Alfred and his lawyer. Outraged, Lucy petitioned the Chamber of Deputies, demanding to know if her husband, a French officer, had been denied a fair defense, a grave insult to justice. Georges Picard, now head of the Statistical Bureau, had followed the Dreyfus Affair from the onset. His new position granted him access to the evidence, or rather, a lack thereof. Picard grew skeptical of Alfred's guilt, defied his superior's orders to fabricate more evidence. Instead, he launched a secret investigation. Picard started to dig through waste paper from the German embassy. He made a discovery that made him sure that Dreyfus was innocent. An unsent note, the Petit Bleu. The note read, "Monsieur, I am primarily awaiting a more detailed description of this matter than the one you provided the other day. Therefore, I request that you send a written such description, so that I can better assess whether I should continue my connection with House R. Signed C." Picard knew who C was. It was the codename that Maximilian von Schwarzenkoffen used for the most important information. The name and address was in the back of the note. Major Esterhazy, Rue de la Bienfaisance, 27 Paris. He kept his findings from his superiors, wary of the political bias that had tainted the original case. Using trusted contacts, he began probing Esterhazy's past, and what he found was troubling. Crippled by debt, Esterhazy lived a lavish life of gambling and affairs. The man also had a huge interest for innovation within the artillery and often showed up at artillery exercises without any explanation to why he was there. When Picard compared Esterhazy's handwriting to the bordereau, the match was unmistakable. Unlike Dreyfus, Esterhazy's rank gave him access to the leaked secrets, and his debts provided a motive. From there, Esterhazy's guilt quickly became apparent. Picard presented his findings to General de Bois de Feur and the new Minister of War, Jean-Baptiste Billon, but they dismissed the case, insisting the Dreyfus case was closed. Billon, uninvolved in the original case, permitted Picard to continue his investigation in secret. Seeking confirmation, Picard consulted Dupaty and Alphonse Bertillon, both prior witnesses against Dreyfus. They confidently declared it matched the bordereau, unaware it implicated Esterhazy. On September 1st, 1896, Picard presented the result of his investigation and urged swift action against Esterhazy and Dreyfus's exoneration. But now he began to meet resistance from his superiors. Billon and de Bois-de-Feu became unavailable, and Deputy Chief of Staff Charles Arthur Gons refused to pursue Esterhazy. But the investigation was allowed to continue. But without permission from Picard's superiors, Esterhazy were not to be contacted in any way. This new investigation was not to be connected to Dreyfus. The General Staff declared that Dreyfus' case was closed, and any new evidence could not change that. In a tense exchange, Gons challenged Picard. "What does it matter if the Jew stays on Devil's Island? He is innocent," Picard insisted. "The matter cannot be reopened," Gons retorted, citing Mercier's involvement. "But what do we do if the family finds out who the real culprit is?" Picard asked. "If you keep quiet, no one needs to know," Gons answered. This exposed the army's fear. Esterhazy's guilt threatened their honor and risked implicating those tied to Mercier. As newspapers began probing the Dreyfus Affair again, the General Staff doubled down, shielding their reputation. To cover up the latest developments and bury the truth, the military ousted Georges Picard from his role as head of the Statistical Bureau, shuffling his army post before exiling him to Tunisia in December 1896. In his place, Hubert Joseph Henry took charge, a loyalist under Jean Sandher and Auguste Mercier. Under Sandher's and Mercier's time, he had been the one leading the investigation for further evidence against Dreyfus. He didn't fail them this time either. Tasked with bolstering the case against Dreyfus, Henry found nothing until he forged a crude document, the Faux Henri. The military, untroubled by its flaws, embraced it. In November 1896, Minister of War Jean-Baptiste Billon assured the government the evidence was ironclad. But appearances are deceiving. From Tunisia, Picard refused to be silenced. In June 1897, during a clandestine Paris visit, he entrusted his investigation documents to Louis Leblois, a lawyer friend, revealing the cover-up and Dreyfus's innocence. Picard even managed to present a letter from General Gons that revealed that Dreyfus wasn't the spy. Leblois contacted Auguste Scheurer-Kestner, a veteran senator and a staunch Republican, who was horrified by the revelations. Scheurer-Kestner rallied the press and Dreyfus' family, even appealing to President Félix Fauré, who referred him to Billon, a mistake. Billon, de Bois-de-Feu and Gons was now nervous, as politics was digging in the Dreyfus matter. Therefore, soon Scheurer-Kestner was shadowed. In October 1897, Henry, now leading the Statistical Bureau, joined Dupaty and Gons in a crisis meeting to tighten the cover-up. They warned Esterhazy of Picard's findings, coaching him to deflect media questions. To discredit Picard, they accused him of slandering Esterhazy. Billon launched an investigation into Picard, undermining Scheurer-Kestner's key source. Undeterred, Scheurer-Kestner published an article on November 14th, 1897, declaring Dreyfus innocent and demanding a retrial. Prime Minister Gilles Méline denied the Dreyfus Affair existed, while Billon publicly insisted Dreyfus was guilty. When Scheurer-Kestner addressed the Senate booed him and later voted to be removed as a spokesman in the Senate. Even then, he stood fair on the innocence of Dreyfus. To erase the threat, the military staged a trial for Esterhazy on January 10th, 1898, a closed-door sham. The public shared Esterhazy, booing witnesses like Picard, and after 3 minutes of deliberation, he was acquitted on January 11th, greeted by 1,500 supporters. But the farce backfired, enraging moderate Republicans who saw justice mocked. As the sham trial fueled outrage, the fight for Dreyfus's innocence gained new allies. Matthew Dreyfus now found allies in France's brightest minds, politicians, artists, and journalists of that time. United, they demanded one thing: a retrial. Bolstered by this coalition, the Dreyfusards turned defiant. Émile Zola thrust the cause onto the global stage with a series of articles in L'Heure. His 4,500-word open letter, Je accuse, exposed the conspiracy against Dreyfus. Selling 300,000 copies in a day, 10 times the paper's usual run, it shook France to its core. Sentenced to a year in prison and a 3,000-franc fine, he fled to England, fearing anti-Dreyfusard riots would erupt if acquitted. Picard was also convicted and went to prison. The article ignited petitions and protests, with many decrying France's tarnished reputations as a just republic. But the anti-Dreyfusards struck back. Antisemitism surged, erupting in deadly riots in Algiers' Jewish quarters and later spreading to Paris. An unholy alliance of royalists, antisemites and conservatives vandalized Jewish shops, apartments, La Aurore's offices and Zola's abandoned home. Police cavalry struggled to quell the mobs. As France burned with division, the Dreyfusards pressed for justice. In June 1898, a new government took power. Determined to end the Dreyfus Affair, Prime Minister Henri Besson appointed Godefroy Cavaignac as Minister of War. Cavaignac ordered access to the secret dossier, troubled that only the judges had reviewed it. He formed a task force to review every document in the dossier. On August 13, 1898, Captain Louis Quignet uncovered a flaw in the For Henri document. Its header and footer colors mismatched the body, revealing it as a glued-together forgery. Quignet showed this to Cavaignac, who after a 2-week pause summoned Major Henri on August 30th. After an hour of questioning, Henri confessed and was imprisoned. The next day, he was found dead, his throat cut, a letter to his wife beside him. The forgery's exposure shattered the case against Dreyfus. The Dreyfusards seized the moments, appealing to the French Supreme Court. During the winter of 1898 and 1899, amid resignations of the government and the Bois de Feu, and then a failed anti-Dreyfusard coup in February 1899, the Supreme Court ordered a retrial in the military court of Rennes. 2 days later, guards on Devil's Island told Dreyfus his conviction was annulled. Reinstated as captain, he donned his uniform and left the island on June the 9th, after 1,517 days of torment. Arriving in France on June the 30th, Dreyfus expected a warm reunion but was met by military and police, escorted to a prison to await trial. But he was finally allowed to meet his family and friends. On August the 7th, 1899, the retrial began. Dreyfusards, anti-Dreyfusards, military officers, politicians, lawyers, experts, and a swarm of journalists filled the courtroom. Alfred Dreyfus's lawyers, Edgar Demange and Fernand Labourie, brimmed with confidence. Days earlier, Esterhazy had admitted to writing the bordereau before fleeing to England. Picard, freed after a year in prison, stood as a witness. Yet former Minister of War Mercier told the press Dreyfus would be convicted. Dreyfus himself was a shadow of his former self. Emaciated, his face skull-like, white-haired and toothless, he wore an oversized uniform, striving to embody an honorable French officer while hiding his frailty. The trial pulsed with unrest. Rumors of riots swirled, and clashes between factions erupted, even shootings. The military summoned over 80 witnesses, sidestepping the discredited dossier to attack Dreyfus's character with long discarded lies, claiming he confessed to treason. The bordereau, now irrelevant after Esterhazy's admission, was ignored. On September the 9th, the court's verdict stunned Europe. Guilty, with a 10-year sentence and another degradation, though with extenuating circumstances. Dreyfus appealed but soon withdrew it after Matthew Dreyfus, negotiated with Prime Minister Pierre Waldeck-Rousseau for a pardon. Picard and other Dreyfusites saw this as a surrender, a betrayal of justice. It was a fight against the Republic's corruption. According to them, giving up now would be an anticlimax of momentous proportion, and it would not solve any problems. Exhausted, Dreyfus and his family relented. On September the 19th, 1899, the Republic president pardoned him. Freed, but not exonerated, Dreyfus's fight for a full vindication endured. Most of the public accepted the conclusion to this affair and focused on what was coming next. By 1900, France turned its gaze to the Paris Exposition, eager to leave the Dreyfus Affair behind. But it was not over little more than a year of the trial. On December the 27th, Prime Minister Waldeck-Rousseau signed a sweeping amnesty, exonerating Zola, Picard, Esterhazy, Dupaty, and other conspirators, but not Alfred Dreyfus. Pardoned but not acquitted, he remained a convicted spy under the Rennes verdict. Justice waited until 1906. After 3 years of investigation, the French Supreme Court reopened the case. On July 12, 1906, the court unanimously declared Dreyfus not guilty. The next day, Dreyfus was reinstated as a captain and awarded the Legion of Honor. In 1907, Dreyfus retired, worn by Devil's Island's toll and humiliated by the Ministry of War's refusal to count his prison years toward promotions. Yet, when World War I erupted, Dreyfus and his son Pierre answered France's call, serving in the artillery. Dreyfus later fought at Verdun and rose to lieutenant colonel. After the war, Dreyfus wrote his memoirs, reflecting on a life marked by injustice and resilience. On July 12, 1935, he passed away in Paris at 75. Dreyfus's legacy endured, a testament to truth's slow triumph. Before you go, please subscribe, like this video, and share your favorite historical insights or favorite moments in the video in the comments. Thank you for joining us in Unraveling the Dreyfus Affair, a pivotal chapter that reshaped French history. Your incredible support truly fuels our passion for sharing these stories. With our latest video now past 45,000 views and our community approaching 3,000 subscribers, we are deeply grateful to you, our fellow history enthusiasts. Together, let's keep the past alive. Stay tuned for more, and remember, history awaits.